This course is about how to find and keep a high performance mentor. The course is led by, there he is, Dan Pena, who founded Great Western Resources Inc., GWRI, a Houston based natural resource company. And in the process, he turned $820 into $450 million. I'll help facilitate. My name is Andrew Warner. I'm the founder of Mixergy, where proven founders like Dan teach. And we've got this big outline coming up of the steps that Dan broke down for getting a mentor and keeping that mentor. What we don't have are images. And this is the first time in a course that we don't have images, but I am not one to push you, Dan, to put together images, especially after, here's where I'd like us to get started, the doofus test. Before we get into what can be done with a mentor and how to get a mentor, I want to talk about the cautionary tale, which is embodied in the doofus test that you run on people. What is that?
Well, it's like the preliminary interview that your organization, Mixergy, did with me to set you up with data information for this interview. Your colleague Jeremy interviewed me on New Year's Eve. I was in London getting ready to go to a New Year's Eve party at the Ritz in London, and he interviewed me between, I believe, 7 and 9 o'clock my time, London time, which Chicago time was for him was 6 hours earlier. So
Because
what does
you
that show?
wanted that, right? Or because he did?
Pardon?
Because you wanted that?
Yes, I wanted it. No,
Why
no,
do you
he had
ask
he had several
Jeremy
other
who
dates,
why do you ask
but I
Jeremy who
wanted it
pre-interviews you,
because
people who you mentor? Why do you ask them all to work with you on Christmas Day,
because
New Year's Eve? I'll bring you the camera.
because it's my indication, and sometimes my only indication, to ascertain if they're serious. If they're serious enough to meet me on Valentine's Day, sometimes Easter, even on Christmas, even on New Year's Day. If I can find out when their birthday is, of course, now everybody flaps their lips on Facebook, so you know everybody's birthday. Years ago, you didn't know that. And because then I know they're serious. And I know that they're focused enough to give up some time that they might be spending with their family. They might be playing golf or relaxing, etc. Because I treat mentoring very, very seriously. And um, as the Navy SEALs say, which I'm not a trained SEAL, but I had similar training in the United States Army. The only easy day was yesterday. And so, mentoring and being successful and being a high performance person is like war, and although the fog of war will come over situations almost every time, you have to know that the guy or the gal on the other side that you're trying to coach, teach, help, assist is serious, that they're willing to give up and make a sacrifice early on. Because at the beginning of any relationship, especially a mentor relationship, there's a honeymoon period. So if they're not willing to make sacrifices in the very beginning, they're sure as hell not going to make sacrifices when the going gets tough.
And that's the
And
obstacle that the person who's listening to us is facing, that the person who they want as a mentor doesn't want them as a protege, has too many things to do, and is setting up barriers, whether it's intentional the way that you are, or maybe as part of their work. And the person who's listening to us needs to get past those barriers to get that mentor. And we have
it's
a
it's
process here that you're going to share with us for doing that. And
correct.
before we get into it, there's one other thing that I know is on our audience's mind, which is they're saying, okay, if this guy is so good, how did he do it? So maybe you can give us one example of how you got a mentor early on so that people who are watching you and saying, he's on top of the world, he doesn't understand my situation. Let's let them see how you got a mentor.
Well, sure as hell, I wasn't always on top of the world. That's for darn sure. But I'll give you one example. The I had three basic mentors in my life. I had Konstantin Gratsos, who was the CEO of NASA Shipping Lines, who was the right-hand man of Aristotle Onassis for 60, 65 years. And I had Jim Newman, the founder of PACE, Personal and Company Effectiveness, who was the mentor for everybody, not everybody, but people from the Joint Chiefs of Staff to many Henry Kissinger, to many very very important people. And then I had Jerry Ormond, who was my mentor, who was in the energy business. who helped me get involved in a business that I had never been had anything to do with. But let's take Costa Grazos first.
Yeah, how did you get him as a mentor?
Well, I was involved in a business transaction in the about 1980, 1981, and with Onassis Shipping Lines as a partner. We had partners in the deal. We had Mobil Oil. We had the Vatican Bank. We had the Philippine government. Coincidentally, I'm now retired here. And he stepped into a room, and we were sitting there. He only spent maybe 2-3 minutes. He listened as he does. He just commented. He says, "If I can be of assistance, let me know." And he left. So I didn't know who he was. So I asked the other guys around the table. We were in the Olympic Towers, Olympic Building in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue. And I said, "Who is that guy?" And he says, "Well, that's Konstantin Gratsos." And I said, "Well," and I didn't know who he was. He says, "He's the CEO of Onassis Shipping Lines, and he used to be the partner of Mr. Onassis for 60 years. Well, when he walked in the room, he looked like a prime minister. He looked like a president. He looked like a king. In fact, he looked like an emperor is what he looked like. And so I made a mental note, and then when we broke, I went outside and I asked some of the Onassis people. I said, "Where's his office?" "Oh, it's about 50 yards from here. It's right down there." And so I tried to make an appointment, and he was booked up for 6-8 months. We had 4 or 5 more meetings there, and he was always booked up. So I said, "Well, if I can't do it one way, I'm going to do it another way." And now I'm led to believe that he knew I was trying to see him. Mm-hmm. And we never specifically had the conversation, but I know that he knew, because an hour later he'd walk down the hall, and he even knew my name by that time. And he says, "Mr. Pena, nice to see you. I hope everything's going well." So then I said, "Well, this isn't working. So maybe this is a test." I didn't think of it as a test at the time. I said, "Well, I got to be more persistent. I can't just, he's only 50 yards down the hallway. Mm-hmm. I had to jump in front of a bus if I can't get to see him." So when the next time we broke early for lunch in one of the meetings, I just went down to his office and I talked to his assistant, who is his gatekeeper, and said, "No, he's very, very busy." But I could see the door open, and I could see a crack through the door. I could see him sitting at his desk. He had an apple, he had an orange, and he had a pear on his desk. I said, "Well, this, opportunity only strikes once." So I went past the gatekeeper. She picked up the phone, and I went past. I did a little gentle knock on the door, and I opened the door a little more. I said, "Mr. Gratsos, you have 20 seconds. "Oh, come in, Mr. Pena, come in, come in." And I said, "Can I buy you lunch today?" He says, "Well, look what the doctors give me, Mr. Pena. An apple, an orange." And he says, "If you promise me you won't tell my wife, we'll go to lunch." And so we went across the street to Le Grand Oui, which is a 1 or 2 Michelin star French restaurant even today. And that's how the relationship started. But he had kept me at bay. He had kept me at bay. Because he wanted to see how persistent I am, or I was. And I do the same thing. I keep people at bay. One of the thresholds or benchmarks that I use when people want me to be involved in a deal is I say, "Well, I don't do business with anybody that doesn't understand my methodology, QLA, Quantum Leap Advantage, and I don't do business with anybody that hasn't at least bought my book." And now I tell people that and after I meet them, if you're really serious, you come to the seminar. And of course, that sounds self-serving, but unless you understand what I really require of a kid, and I call you all kids because I'm older than all of you, the relationship's not going to work out. Because I learned the CEO of Nestle, which one of my partners used to work for. It was an honor and a privilege when the CEO of Nestle called you at 3:00 in the morning, Sunday morning, to ask you a question. It was honor and a privilege. And because he knew your phone number, or he took the time to get it, and you knew that you were on the fast track at Nestle. All of life is that way.
All right. So you put together a doofus test and a barrier to entry, and you wait to see who can get through it. And the same thing happened to you. And once you did push that door open, you were able to get a mentor that helped you out and someone who was way, way, way more advanced than you. All right, we are all
Correct.
who are listening here have some kind of barrier in front of us or between us and the person who we want to be as a mentor. And the first step to understanding how to get through it is you're saying, obviously, be careful who you pick. And when you say be careful who you pick, do you have an example of someone who was the wrong person? Why do you say be careful who you pick as the first step?
Well, I've never picked the wrong person because I've only done it 3 or 4 times in my whole life. But I do know people that have picked the wrong person because what they do, it's like Napoleon Hill said, the human being is like a river. It meanders to the path of least resistance. So they go to the person that says yes, or they go to the person that's their uncle, or they go to the person that's a friend of their uncle, went to school with their brother, et cetera, as opposed to the person that really is the right person for them. And because we would rather have least resistance, because then we don't have to worry about our self-esteem getting knocked. We don't have to worry about our self-confidence getting knocked. And we have a much higher probability of success with somebody that we know. The best mentors that I've seen other people get aren't through referrals. In other words, you, Andrew, tell me to call Jeremy. The best mentors I've ever seen my mentees obtain outside of myself are when they knocked on the door, or I once needed an appointment with the head of the TWA pension fund, and I found out where he lived. I went and parked my car in his driveway sideways, so he couldn't get up his big driveway to his house. And then at 5 o'clock in the morning, I remember Jim knocked on my window and he says, "Hey, kid, what the hell are you doing in my driveway?" And I woke up, I said, "Oh, I've been trying to get a hold of you for weeks and I can't get a hold of you. And so I found out where you lived." He said, "How did you find out where I lived?" And I told him, and so he's mad about that. And he said, "Oh, okay, come on in the house." And his wife was standing at the door in her bathrobe, and she said, "That car's been sitting out there." And I called the police, but the police said he hadn't done anything wrong, so they didn't do anything to him. And I sat up and I had an early breakfast with him, and I told him about what I needed, and he said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm surprised that I wouldn't be able to get through all his gatekeepers." Of course, the real answer is the gatekeepers asked me what I wanted to talk about, and my suggestion was that you eliminate about 25% of the employees. So who's going to
why
let
would
me
an
in?
employee let you in to tell him to get rid of employees?
Correct.
And
Correct.
One more thing about this topic about being careful who you pick, and you're right, most of us will go towards the path of least resistance, the easiest person who's going to say yes, instead of working up the courage to get to the right person. Another thing that you told Jeremy that was important here is to look for someone who has more experience in the area of expertise that you need. And that one thing that you need, you want to find someone who specializes in it and has got further along with it. And you told him
Correct.
about Jerry Orman. Who is Jerry Orman?
Jerry Orman was the chairman and founder of a company called Orman Industries. And it was the fastest growing company on the American Stock Exchange in the 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s. He was my, like a second father to me. He and his wife, Dottie, God rest their souls. And he was a very successful energy guy, oil guy. And when I decided to go in the energy business, and I actually started my first fund, it was a tax shelter fund, which was legal up until the Tax Reform Act of '86. I went to Jerry and didn't know him. I had seen him at a oil convention type thing, and I made a point to go see him in Dallas. First couple of times, he was always busy. So then I just went to Dallas on a Sunday night, and I figured I asked the secretary, "Well, is he going to be in town next week?" That's all I asked. I didn't ask for an appointment anymore because I got tired of her telling me no. So I went there, and I found out he went to the Dallas Petroleum Club. I wasn't a member of the Dallas Petroleum Club, but I was a member of the Houston Petroleum Club at that time, or actually one of my partners was. So they got me a special invite, and I sat there all damn week until he walked in. Then I was on him like a cheap suit. And
because he had what expertise that you needed?
Well, he had built a company from scratch. He was poor. He had no money. He come from Electra, Texas, a population 2,000 people. He had some success because on a scholarship he played on the only SMU, that's Southern Methodist University, rolled Cotton Bowl, or I think it was Cotton Bowl team in 1937 or 38, something like that. And he was where I wanted to be. He had a very successful public company.
Very successful public company like you wanted, and he had
that
your
I
kind of
wanted because
background.
right then I had just raised my first $1.3 million in a drilling fund. 1.3 seems like nothing. I could probably make, I wouldn't even have to make a phone call to raise $1 million today. But I mean, in those days, I worked like hell. It took me 4 or 5 months to raise a paltry $1.3 million. But so I had a little bit of success, not much, a little bit of success. And in those days, everybody with a cheap suit was in the drilling fund or tax shelter business, believe me. And even people in San Francisco, Andrew, even people in San Francisco.
Kind of
And
like today, everyone with an iPad has an internet business
yes.
idea to be funded.
Correct.
But you went to the right person and you said, he has expertise in the area that I want to rock, and he has my background. That's why you picked him, not because he was the most handy. All right.
No.
Then the next thing you say is,
I lived in Los Angeles. He lived in Dallas. There was nothing handy about him. And then I became his mentor of his son, Ron, who went to UCLA, and then he went to UCLA and got an MBA. And then he's retired now. It's hard to believe that Ronnie's retired because he's 10 years younger than I am. But he was the head of the energy practice of one of the big investment banks. So I nurtured him along and for 20, 25 years. And unfortunately, Jerry Orman passed away about 10 years ago. But
I'm sorry to hear that. On to the next big point. I'm sorry to hear it, and then yet I still move on right to the next point. I should be a little more compassionate, shouldn't I?
No, that's fine.
I apologize. All right, on to the next one. Next big point is ask him or her to be your mentor. And actually, let me ask you this. I got to move on to the next point in a moment, but how am I? Am I too abrupt and too focused on the goal here? Am I pacing this too quickly?
No. Not for me, you're not. In fact, you're a little slow for me.
I'm a little slow for you. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you're a little slow. And I don't know anybody that knows you personally other than Jeremy.
Yes.
And he only has fine things to say about you. But I'm sure after a couple of drinks, I could really get the truth out of him. But no, for most people, now see, I think, and I'm not being braggadocious, but I think normally 25 to 50% ahead of the people I'm talking to. When I was your age, I used to get in a lot of trouble because you'd be talking and I would finish your sentence for you.
And then move on to the next topic.
And then
like this.
Finish your question, then answer the question.
I see.
While you were still thinking about it. And as I grew older and I got into my 40s, then I knew that really pissed people off. And I don't really care if they were pissed off. But what I did care is I wasn't getting my objective done. And now that I've coached 20 years, I realize that I'm a lot faster than most of the people I coach. So I'm not doing them any good, and I'm not doing myself any good. So I slow down a little. But your speed is fine for me. You can go quicker.
Do not slow down for me. I will keep on moving quickly until I catch up and overtake your speed.
Okay, good.
I think I could. Let's see. Next one is ask him or her to be your mentor, and they have to like you too. All right, so here's the thing. In this case, I understand that if I'm going to someone and asking them to be my mentor, I want them to like me. But how do I get this person who barely has time for me to like me, to take an interest in me enough to feel some similarity and some interest and some kinship?
Actually, it's easy. And it's easy by first hurdle is they're going to have some sort of either a conscious or unconscious doofus test. The doofus test is either going to be implemented by their gatekeeper, and some people, very, very high performance people, have more than one gatekeeper. I have a mentee who was the CEO of a global 20 company that had 3 gatekeepers. You might be able to get through the first one. You might even be able to get through the second one. But I mean, the guy himself needed to make an appointment with the third one.
I see.
And so that's the first thing that endears them to you because it's persistent.
You're saying if I cleared those hurdles, then they already feel some connection with me because
they know that they've done. For an example, we were in a tax-related business many years ago, and we were calling on Kraft food. And my business partner, on the 100th cold call, to the CFO of Kraft, the CFO, the 100th, he took his call. Now, it's not a coincidence that it was on the 100th, because the guy or his secretary and gatekeepers were keeping track. It's like in the movie Wall Street. Gordon Gekko, the young guy that was played by
Bud Fox. This is Sean. What's his
correct.
name?
They gave him the Cuban cigars and the
Charlie
Dom Perignon or whatever. On the 100th or 200th call, whatever it was, he took his call, because they realized that if you've got the persistence. So that's the kindred spirit. The next thing is, when you go to see them or when you first talk to them, don't be a yes person. Be yourself, because most of the people will say something outrageous just to see how you comment. So be yourself. The next way that you endear them to you and get honesty out of them is when you go to see them ultimately, and you either for a coffee, a lunch, or whatever, and they're going to tell you to meet them at some place that's convenient for them, because it's not going to be a reverse doofus test. Always pay. Even if it's his club, try to pay. Or what I used to do is I used to call the club beforehand and say, do you allow guests to pay? And they say only if, either they'll say yes. And then what you do is, as you go in, and you always go there early, you leave your credit card with the maitre d' so it can get paid, so he can pay. Now that'll absolutely endear them to you, because guys like them and guys like me are always paying.
I'm always
Most
paying.
people don't even offer to
You're
pay.
absolutely right. And if somebody offered to pay, I have a hard time letting them. But you're right. Go ahead of time and put your credit card down and make sure that you pay. It goes a long way.
And really try. Don't just put it there and hoping that he can see in your eyes that maybe he won't make me pay. But really try, because these guys have people, trying to sap their time all week, all month, all year. And it's a refreshing change of pace. And if you get to see the person the next time, you should be, if you like to play golf, hopefully they like to play golf.
Hang on. Well, now we're giving the whole story away too quickly. Let's go one step at a time here. I gotta turn this whole conversation into a course and show people the value of it by breaking down all the ideas into few tactical steps. All right. The next one is find something non-business in common, which is what you just started to say.
Correct.
You and Jerry Orman, who you mentioned earlier, what did you guys have in common outside of this love for business and the warrior spirit in business?
Golf. We had golf in common. And
Okay.
he used to belong to Bel Air Country Club, which more retired Fortune 500 CEOs and CFOs belong there than any other country club in the United States. And I used to go. He actually lived on the ninth hole of Bel Air Country Club, and I used to go there and play golf with him, and then go out to dinner with he and his wife Dottie, and we played golf, all over the country. I used to belong to Riviera Country Club, which is one of the leading country clubs in the United States, where they played the LA Open. It's now called the LA Nissan Open or something, and so we had golf in common. And so we made it easier for us to get along. Although we got along almost instantly, it was a real honor and a pleasure to work with him for so many years, 25 years.
Dan, how do you, if you see that someone's interested in, say, kite surfing, I could understand going and taking kite surfing lessons so that you can get involved with that and have that common interest, but it still feels a little bit forced to say, oh, you like kite surfing? I do too. We should go kite surfing sometime.
Well, at my age and in my period of time, nobody was doing kite surfing. So although I did skydive, and a few people that I was in business with skydive, but an interesting story, Jerry Ormond, who was a paratrooper in World War II, had jumped into Germany, I think it was, and fought for the door. He said, only crazy people jump out of good planes. So it's not like Jerry and I are going to do skydiving together. And but in my particular case, I do a lot of things. I've done a lot of things, and and I have done hang gliding, skydiving, kite surfing, and all that stuff. But normally, tennis, golf, for example, Costa Grazos and I, it was good food and wine and cigars. And in those days, I used to smoke cigars. I don't anymore. And so he used to love to go to great restaurants. In Jim Newman's case, it was tennis. I used to be a very good tennis player, and he was a good tennis player. And so we had something in common. But the real commonality that joins all of this is the love of business, the morality of doing the right thing, and the having the success and work ethic to get things done. I still remember being in a 40, 50-hour meeting with Jerry Orman in London, and he was, let's see, he would have been about 77 or 78 at that time. And one of the lawyers took us aside during the break. He said, Mr. Pena, we've been here almost 40 hours. I said, yeah, so what? And he says, Mr. Orman is looking tired. And what I didn't know is that I thought he got there 2 days before the meeting. He had just arrived because he missed his plane. So he had been up about 60 hours, 65 hours. And for a guy in his late 70s, that's a long time. I'd like to see you up 65 hours. So, or any of the young kids, And so we took a break, and he felt so embarrassed that I had to take a break because he looked tired. He was still doing all right mentally, but he looked tired. And when a lawyer, lawyers wouldn't give you ice in winter, tells you we should break because one of the principals is tired, he must have really looked tired.
For me to keep going, it's yerba mate. This got a nice, I learned this in Argentina, got a nice amount of caffeine. You won't crash, and takes a little bit of time for the caffeine to enter your system. So,
well, I'm drinking green tea, and I don't drink whatever caffeine's in green tea, which isn't much. But I used to live on espressos, and I used to have 15, 20 cups of coffee a day and 4 or 5 espressos when I was your age.
I drink yerba mate a lot, but on camera it looks a little weird to be sucking on a straw. So
yeah.
I have tea, coffee, water in here. All right, on to the next big point, which is, let me bring this up here. Pay attention to your mentor, even if they're far. Why did you include this in the list? Do you have an example of someone who didn't?
Because ideally, you want somebody that's geographically desirable. Mm-hmm. It's like when you were dating, you wanted a girlfriend that lived, around the corner, preferably.
Right.
Or went to the same school. You didn't want one that was, you lived in Cleveland and they lived in Memphis. Actually, that's too close. You lived in Cleveland and they lived in San Diego. So you want them geographically desirable because you want to make it easy on them and on you to see one another as often as possible. Mm-hmm. But my mentors, having said that, although I used to live in Los Angeles for a time, but when I wasn't there for 20 years, Jim Newman still lived there. So whenever I went to the United States, I'd stop off in New York to see Grazos. I'd stop off in Dallas to see Jerry Orman, and then I'd stop off in Los Angeles to see Jim Newman, just to see him. Because the other thing is, don't just go to see these guys or gals when you need something from them. Because everybody needs something from them. You want to go and see them because you just want to have dinner. And of course, they knew I was going way out of my way to go see them. Now, that was early on in my career, and later on in my career when I had my own planes, I never asked them about it, but I don't think they thought it was such a big effort for me to divert from Los Angeles to New York to stop off for a day to have dinner with Jerry Orman. But it's really important, and they'll remember that. And when you need them, they will respond.
I see. When you say pay attention to your mentor, even if they're far away, you mean stay in touch with them. Just because they happen to be in another city, another state, another country, doesn't mean that you shouldn't go and connect with them. And when you do, it's not
Correct.
all business. It's just, hey, I was on my way from London to California, from California to London. I thought I would stop off in New York just to say hello and get to know you. You had one
Correct.
situation, this is a little bit off topic here, but one situation that apparently sent where one of your mentees talked to you and apparently the paramedics had to come at the end of this conversation. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
The paramedics had to come for him or
For
myself,
you.
not for me.
No?
No, 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 not for
Let's take a
me.
look at Jeremy's notes. Here's what it was. A mentee came over to my house because he needed to talk. I thought this guy was about to tell me that he was gay.
Oh, yeah, yeah, correct, correct. John Macias. This is a kid. I went back and taught a year at Cal State University Northridge, an honors class, where I graduated undergraduate school. And the kids had to compete to get to the class, in the class, etc. And had to write an essay, and then I ultimately approved it. And this kid named John Macias, they had to go through an interview, and for the first interview that he came to, he wore a suit, and back in the 90s, kids didn't wear suits to school, and the kids certainly didn't wear suits to interviews on campus. They just didn't. He came wearing a suit. So, and I sat down, we sat down, and I said, well, hello, John, my name's Dan Pena, how can I help you? As I normally open conversations. And he started, the, he stuttered, and stuttered badly. So we got through the interview, but I liked the kid, and he was a great student, and so I let him in the program. At the end of the year, he won the Eastman Kodak Public Speaking Award.
Wow.
And so he was off to go to, I forget where he was going to graduate school. It might have been University of Chicago, or I don't remember. So before he left, he came back and he wanted to see me, wanted to thank me. And so I always used to open the conversation, and I used to have him come before classes. And I'd say, I want to introduce, like that, and everybody'd laugh. And I'd say, what's not so funny when, he couldn't speak through a sentence. And we're sitting in the couch in my house in Rolling Hills, California. We're overlooking Catalina, and the whales are sailing by or swimming by. I've got a view from Malibu to Newport Beach, one of the great properties in California. And he tells me, I thought he came to tell me he was gay, which is fine. I don't care. He tells me he's going to join the priesthood.
Priest.
And I go, it's the big one. Bring the goddamn paramedics. I mean, it's the big one. I literally fell off my chair, and my big Great Dane at the time, Chaos, such look at my face. And I said, John, are you effing crazy? And I try to talk him out of it. Then I introduced him to 2-3 priests that I know. I introduced him to a bishop I know. And then on top of it, he joins the sect that's the real strict one, like the one in Opus Dei or whatever it is, the one in the movie with Tom Hanks.
The Da Vinci Code, yes.
Yeah. He joins that one, not just a regular priest. And I thought to myself, the best prospect I ever trained, I brought him from stuttering, he couldn't talk, to being a national public speaking contest winner. And then he goes off and joins the priesthood. Now, I needed the paramedics because I kept yelling at my maid, get the paramedics. I'm going to have a stroke right here. But it proves a couple points. You never can underestimate how wrong you can be. That's number one. And the second one, and probably more importantly, man plans and God laughs. I mean, I had in my mind this kid was going to be the first Hispanic president. I had in my mind, I mean, you can't imagine the things that I had indulged myself in thinking. And then he goes, and I'm not saying it's bad to be a priest for you religious people. The Pope just resigned. That's another story. By the way, I sent the Pope, the pontiff, a tweet the next day he resigns. True story.
Dangerous tweet. And
it was
the
a
point with
dangerous
that
tweet.
story about the guy who became a priest is stay in touch, pay attention, even if you're not going down the path that they had in mind for you. He didn't come to you to be for advice on how to be a priest. He's just staying in touch, keeping that relationship warm without asking for anything business related, so that when there is an important business need, that warmth will help facilitate the business.
Correct.
All right, on to the next then. Follow their advice and share your progress. You had one person, and this is a big one, by the way. A lot of times I would feel uncomfortable saying, Dan's my mentor. I should tell Dan what my progress is. He doesn't care. He has so much other things going on. But you as a mentor, you're telling me you want to know the progress. You want an update. What kind of update do you like?
Well, this is going to scare some of your students.
I like it.
Okay,
Scare me.
well, you haven't heard it yet. The I've been doing this 20 years, and I would also recommend everybody read my last two newsletters that I talk about what I learned in 20 years of coaching. But one of them is you can never have too much feedback, both ways. And the way that I promote that, and I instill it just the last 2-3 years, is I require weekly reports from my mentees, weekly reports. And I used to have quarterly reports that were okay. Then I used to have monthly reports. It got a little better. But since I shifted the weekly reports in late 2009, where it's very simple. There's 3 sections. First section is accomplishments for the week. Second section is what I am going to accomplish the next week. And the third section is problems or challenges. And I can read that. First of all, if your accomplishments that you say you're going to make for the next week are not what you did for this week, then I know you're offline. And it's very easy for me to look on your weekly report whether you're on the mark, you're falling behind. Is it an emotional issue? Is it a financial issue? Is it a lack of understanding the need to know how to read financial statements? I can figure all that out just on a weekly report. And then I often have mentees say, Dan, you didn't comment on my weekly report. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if you're doing everything goddamn right, I don't comment. Or I just say, keep pushing to your quantum leap. That means everything that I read is fine. But if you list no problems or challenges, I don't accept that, because everybody's got challenges and everybody's got problems. Now, what I would rather see is this is the challenge and this is how I handled it. So when you come to me with a problem, I want to know 1 or 2 or 3 solutions. And so we're constantly and weekly discourse, dialogue. And in addition to that, I have monthly, not Skype, but I forget I use some other system where I have all my mentees. Now they're split up into 2 sections because there's so many of them. But I have all my mentees on a thing where you can see everybody's face and you talk, and you have as much time as you want. I don't get off until everybody's said their piece. And some of the other kids will comment, well, I think Andrew, you're wrong. That's not right. I mean, didn't you learn anything? I mean, don't you listen to Mr. Pena? I mean, what are you smoking out there in San Francisco? Is that why
you're on this video chat with you, talking to each other on a weekly basis?
No, this is a monthly
basis. But at the very least, you're saying to the person who's listening to us, if you've got a mentor, keep them updated on a regular basis, and you prefer weekly, and you've given us an understanding of what goes into your reports, and you're suggesting that that's what we do with our mentors.
Correct.
All right, on to the next one. This is one that you said earlier, and I said, hold off. Let's wait to tell them about this, because, well, let me read it first. Always pick up the tab, even if you have no money. And there was a time when you had no money.
Correct.
And you, let me see. Actually, it's the story about Dr. Jim Bennett that I was thinking you could tell, where you went to dinner with him and his wife.
Yep.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
You were at that point in your life?
Dr. Jim Bennett, I had been out of school and graduate school about 3 or 4 years. I was just getting on my feet. I hadn't really come up with, I've tried a few things, but hadn't come up with my first idea. I was working on Wall Street at the time. And I hadn't developed my own Wall Street persona. And anybody that's successful on Wall Street's got to have their own gig. Mm-hmm. They got to have their own shtick. I was just in the beginning of that, and actually, and I went out to dinner with he and his wife, and I was broke, what seemed like broke at the time, and I bought dinner because, and I bought dinner for a number of reasons. Number one, he was my educational mentor who believed in me and allowed me to go back and graduate from university in 2.5 years when I had flunked out the first time before I went off to the Vietnam War for 4 years. And he had a lot of faith in me. I took 26 units in a semester, which is almost double what you normally take. I went to 2 universities at the same time. I took double load in summer school, and he allowed it because he was the dean of the School of Business. But I know he was a college professor. He didn't have any money. And so I picked up the tab, and he knew that I was just starting. Maybe I was only out of school, maybe a year and a half. And so he really tried to pick up the tab. And a few years ago, he came to visit my wife and I at the castle with his wife and some friends. They were on a holiday through Scotland, and these are all other college professor type people. And they said, "Well, how did you know that Dan was going to be successful?" And he says, "Well, his academics, et cetera, et cetera." But when he picked up our dinner bill for, at that time, $135, and he had no money, I knew that he was going to be successful.
I forgot the camera was right on me as I was looking up a picture of your castle here. But I heard you saved up money so that you could take him out to dinner. I heard that you had, we're talking hundreds of dollars to your name at that point.
Yeah, maybe I had $1,000 total.
$1,000 to your name. Today, what are you worth, Dan?
Oh, well, I'm not worth much because they're all in trusts. But in today's dollars terms, that $450 million you talked about earlier is almost $1 billion in today's dollars. Those dollars, you have to remember, are 20 plus years old.
But that's the value of the stock. That's not what you ended up keeping, right?
No. When I walked away with 18% of the company. But at that time, I owned 60% of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 60% of the 200 or 450 million. And that's why I'm such a strong believer in going public, IPOs, because it's really the only game in town that's legal that you can turn virtually nothing into something. And the story there is I didn't even own what I took public. I took an option that I paid $60,000 for, which I had to borrow to give to a Texas oil guy to buy a certain bunch of assets. I had 6 months to pay for them. I took that option public on the London Stock Exchange. Until that date, nobody had ever taken an option public in the history of the world.
It was an option to buy what?
It was the oil properties in
So you didn't even, you took a
Texas
company public that was an oil company that didn't have oil properties. All it had was the right to buy oil properties. Correct. You took it public. The public markets gave you cash. Use that cash to exercise your option and buy the property that you had an option to buy. And instantly, like that, you had a publicly traded company with assets. And
instantly, like that, in one afternoon, in one afternoon, I was worth $50 million.
Do you have over 100 million liquid in all of these trusts?
Well, I can't tell you that, but it's not right to the other beneficiaries of the trust. But I'll tell you this, that I've been wealthy a long time, and as good, as nice as this interview is with Mixergy and yourself, even the very most optimistic thing that could happen to me from this interview isn't going to change my life any. It just isn't.
So why are you doing
And I have the only benefit is that maybe I'll have an opportunity to help some more kids, because I get off on that. And just as much as I used to get off on making money. But that option that I took public, after I did it, about 100 or 150 companies took options public right after I did, following on the back of me. Then they changed the law in London. You can't do it anymore. So then I went to Amsterdam, which was the first stock exchange in the world, the Amsterdam Beurs, and I did it there. And then about 40, 50 companies followed me there. Now, to the best of my knowledge, because I've looked around for many years, there's no other place you can do that anymore. Otherwise, I'd do it again. But when I first thought of that, Andrew, they thought I was nuts. They didn't think I was nuts. They knew I was nuts because nobody had ever taken an option public before. But it's not different than buying an option on a piece of property and then syndicating. Yeah, but now everybody does it. But back then in 1984, nobody did it.
Here's what I have for a photo of your place. This is the place where in the interview I interviewed you on Mixergy, and I invited the audience to stop by. And you said, "Oh no, Andrew, do not invite the public into my house. This is your place."
Yeah, that's an old picture, but yeah, that's the house. And around the top on the right-hand side and to the way far left is the golf course that we have, private golf course.
Oh, there you go. All right, and we're going to come back to this in a moment because I want to ask you about what else is on this page. Since I have one visual, I might as well play it up. This is on danpena.com, and we'll come back to this in a moment. All right, we have everything there on that topic. Let's go on to the next one, which is don't get frustrated if you don't get the answers you want. If you don't get the answers you're looking for, cool off. Do you have an example of someone who
Sure.
was pissed?
First of all, I'll use you as an example. Many months ago, when you first approached me to be interviewed by Mixergy and yourself, I wasn't that enamored with the idea, and so we had a couple conversations, I recall, and a couple of emails, and because my first thought was no. And when you ask somebody to do something or something that requires some effort on their part, and they say no, it's because you didn't give them enough information to make a yes answer. Okay. You, to your credit, came back to me 2 or 3 times, and then I believe Jeremy did once, because then you dropped it on me. It's not just an interview, Dan. It's a 2-banger. There's 2 interviews, and I go, what the F for? What do you mean 2? I'm a cogent person. I can speak well. He says, no. We have a pre-interview to set up the interview. Okay, so now I got to devote twice as much time because I thought to something I didn't want to do anyway. Okay, so that's very good. That's very slick. But you didn't take no for an answer in the beginning. You pursued it, and so now I'm just you just beat me like an old rented mule. So which is okay. I know what the program is, but I've asked people to do things in the past, and they've said no. And of course, this is before internet, but I'd call them, I'd write them a letter, or I'd write them and call them depending on what I thought was appropriate. But if they said no, I'd get on a plane, just like I did to that guy at TWA, and I'd sit in front of his house. And I don't know if I gave him any different information. I really don't think I did, but I know I sure as hell impressed him that I was serious. Here's a young kid in his late 20s. And of course, at that time, I drove a 450 SL Mercedes, brand new. It was 78, and I bought it in 77. It was the kind with the convertible 2-seat. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting there in his driveway, shivering. And but I go, and if I don't get a yes that time, then I'll say, okay, I obviously didn't give you enough information. Because the real big hitters will answer you right on the spot. They don't have to think about anything. They can the permutations they go through are instantaneous.
You're saying if they have a no, they could give you a no right away. If they have a yes, they can give you a yes right away.
No, if they say they're going to think about it, then I used to say, well, it depends on the situation, but I'll say, good, I'll be back the day after tomorrow. I won't be here at 5 a.m. What's a good time for you? Like selling insurance, Tuesday or Thursday at 1 or 4 o'clock. And then before they can, I said, okay, Tuesday it is. And I'll come a little early, let's have lunch. Okay, then I'll go back, and after every meeting I have, whether it's about mentee or mentors or anything, I always have an after-action report to myself. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And now I've done it so many thousands of times, I can instantaneously, I can correct an interview or a meeting as I'm going through it, because I know I can tell from body language. That's what I don't like about Skype. You can't really sense body language. You can't really sense, the ambiance or the nuances, I should say, of the meeting as well as in person. So that's why I'm very much better in person at selling an idea or getting someone to agree with me.
Plus on Skype, especially if you have these kinds of controls, I can hide myself. I can show web pages. I can focus on me. It is a much tougher environment. All right, but you don't get the answer you want, don't get frustrated. What about this? That I come to you as a mentor and I ask you about one problem and you say, no, let's look at this other
You
problem
mean
over
a
here.
mentee. You come to me as a mentee, not
Oh,
mentor.
sorry, excuse me, as a mentee. So I come to you as a mentee and I say, Dan, I've got this problem where I don't have enough people coming to my site. And you go, no, no, Andrew, your problem is that you're not charging enough. There's not enough revenue coming in. I hear that a lot, that the whole, not only am I not getting the right answer that to the question I'm looking for, I'm getting a whole other question being posed to me, a whole other topic that I'm told that I need to look at. And when a mentor does that, what do you do?
Well, first of all, you think hard about what is he saying. Um, the, um, the idea of getting traffic. Too many people on the internet sell something nobody wants. Okay, and that's the great thing about the internet is your success of your campaign is almost instantaneous, whether it's pay per click, search engine optimization, Facebook, whatever it is. You either get the response or you don't get the response. Okay, if you get a lot of response, it means you got interest. It doesn't mean it's going to convert into sales. So I tell people, when you started this site, how much research did you do in whether the product was needed or wanted by anybody? Now, if if it's Facebook, well then, and there's two or three derivations of Facebook that came out before Facebook, like MySpace and some of the other things. So there's obviously a market. Facebook has capitalized on the fact that most people live quiet lives of desperation and they want to connect with somebody.
Forgive me, Dan, but
Tell
what I
their
mean
story.
is, and apart from this issue of I come to you, talk about traffic, and you say, no, look at revenue. I mean, what happens when we as proteges go to our mentors and say, hey, I've got this problem? They say, no, no, I don't want to talk about that problem. I think you have this other problem over here.
Okay, well then you say, well, Mr. or Miss, I don't understand. Could you please explain to me why traffic's not my problem? Now, I wouldn't ask that question because I know traffic's not your problem. It's because the thing you're selling is probably no good. Okay, but your real ultimate problem and the real reason you're asking the problem about the traffic is you're not making enough money. So that's what that guy's saying. You're right, you're not making enough money. And so what the second part of that conversation might be or should be is you got to think about changing the product that you're selling, because what your real problem is, your real challenge is you're not making enough money.
So you're
And
saying listen to the person because you may not think this is the problem that you have, but an outsider sometimes has a better perspective because
correct,
he's not
absolutely.
so focused on the problem the same way day after day. He has a fresh view of it.
Yeah, it's like it's like what do you call it? Applications, apps. Everybody and his dog's got an application idea. That many. I got 5 fingers up. That many make money. Make money that you can talk about, be proud of. You need to know your market. Most of the
You're
kids,
saying that many make Dan Pena money. Is that fair to
no,
say?
even less than Dan
Even
Pena
less than
money.
Dan Pena money, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, but not that many people do enough research. And I don't mean to demean the youth of the world, but nobody wants to put in the time and the labor, and and drain not just your financial bank account but your emotional bank account into these new projects. I mean, something that you thought up in 2 minutes may work, but it'll probably take you 6 months to implement. But that's what's great about the internet. You know instantaneously whether anybody likes it or not.
I do love that. And instantaneously, they probably don't like you, and it takes a little bit of time. I know it did with me. Many
Yeah.
people watching me still don't like me, but they like the person who I interview. They like the person who I have on. So that
Yeah.
helps
Well,
me continue.
that's great. That's part of your angle.
Let's see. Next one is, and this is, I think, one that's going to be controversial because it's so different from what I've heard in past interviews. You are saying do not accept their investment money in your company.
Correct.
Most people I've heard will say, don't take advice from someone who hasn't invested in your company. Maybe not most people, investors who I've talked to, startup mentors, because if they don't have enough skin in the game, if they haven't put up their money and are worried about losing it, they don't have enough reason to want to see you succeed. And you're saying the opposite. Don't take their cash.
Okay, well, then you've got the wrong person as a mentor. The guys that put up money for Facebook,
Yep.
if you notice, weren't Zuckerberg's mentors, except for Andreessen, if my memory serves me correctly, because there's a lot of net gurus that made billions, but I think it was Andreessen who was the first or one of the first investors in Facebook. He put up, I think, $500,000. He was the closest thing on that board to being Zuckerberg's mentor.
Okay.
Those other guys are investors, and I'm talking about two different things. I'm not talking about investors. With the mentors, with the dream team that you put together, you'll be able to get the investors. And when people ask John Jones, why hasn't Mr. Pena put up any money and he's your chairman and or your mentor? And the right answer, and it's not the answer I ever came up with, but this came up, somebody came up with this 15, 20 years ago. Mr. Pena's time and knowledge and experience are worth much more than his money, and which is true. And I stopped putting money in deals other than occasionally, long time ago, because I find that, and I'm no different than anybody else, as soon as you put $1 in a deal, you're conflicted. You're conflicted because just natural human emotion is, I'm worried about my money. You're not necessarily worried about the product. You're not necessarily worried about the other investors. You're not necessarily worried about the guys that came in after you. And that's why so many people, like the big Facebook guys, are all getting out of the deal. Even the big Google guy, this ex-CEO, just cashed in or is cashing in for 1.5 billion. Okay. Now that's the other thing is, when I'm an investor, I'm only investing because I'm interested in an exit.
And you're no longer interested in the entrepreneur's well-being and his financial
No. Well,
success?
that's part of it. I try to. I think I'm a bigger person than that, but it's hard to. It's a conflict, and I'm interested in an exit. I'm not interested to own this thing forever. That's why the average length of a venture capital fund or a hedge fund is 7 years, because they went in and they went out, and for investment periods, 7 years is a long time. I personally, because I'm 67 now, I'm interested in 2-3 year deals that turn into 3-4 year deals. Because man plans, God laughs. And when people come to me, and I'm in the process of going to some other people on the energy deal that I alluded to earlier, one of which runs $1 billion, one of my mentees, and I'm not asking him for his money. He's a double Harvard graduate, MBA undergraduate, was the youngest mayor in the United States 20 years ago of an incorporated city. I don't want his money. I want his knowledge. And of course, he'll say, but Dan, you have all my knowledge, which is true. I probably do. But I want his Rolodex, which they don't have anymore, his Harvard Rolodex. Because the guy that invented alternative energy probably went to Harvard. I don't want his money. So, people delude themselves, and they think, and I have a very successful mentee in New York who thinks every time she gets 50 grand from somebody, she had an orgasm. Well, 50 grand to a billionaire is like blowing his nose. It doesn't mean any commitment. What it might mean is, I'll get Andrew off my back so he stops fucking calling me.
So I'm going to give him $50,000 to get off my back.
Correct. Or maybe more.
I get that.
Because you're allegedly an important person, Andrew, and you got a TV show and you got exposure. Me, I just tell you to piss off. I don't care. But some of these other guys that say, oh shit, let's give him 50 grand and get him off our back.
All right.
And if what you say is true about you.
It's what?
If what you say is true about you and you got people that don't like you, you might have had a lot of 50 grands.
What do you mean? That I've had to give people a lot of money?
No, that they had to give you to get them off your back, get you off their back.
No one gave me $50,000 to get me off their back. They would have paid extra to get me on their back.
Congratulations.
All right, final point, and then I want to ask you one last thing, but here's the final point. And I think this is really important. You say, do not let them lose face. Give them credit when the thing succeeds. Take the fall when it fails, because above all else, they're not doing this for the money. They're doing this for a good feeling. And when you rob them of that good feeling, when you cause them to lose face, you are taking away the one thing that they want, the one incentive. And do I have that right?
Pretty well, pretty well. And it gets back to, see, they're not there because they don't need the money, i.e. that's why you don't ask them for the money, getting back to the last point. But I'll give you a prime example.
Okay.
I was partners with a very large Asian petroleum company. And we more or less had an unlimited budget with them. We'd come with an idea, and that's how I got involved in exploring in the Gulf of Mexico. And I went to meet the chairman and the president of the company, and in their capital of their Asian city, which will remain nameless right now. I took training from a guy on etiquette that went to school with the current leader of their country, had gone to grammar school, high school, and university with him. So on etiquette, what to do, what not to do, like in the Middle East, you don't cross your legs because it shows shoe leather on the bottom. I had all this stuff. So I went through about 4, 5, 6 weeks of this. I had my cards printed up in the language. And I went to them and I said, Mr. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, we're having a private dinner in their big formal dining room. I wanted to thank you for your initial inquiries, and then secondly for your initial investment, which I think at that time was about $135 million. But I want you to know, any challenges, and I only started using challenges recently. I don't like that word. They're problems. Any problems that we have that are associated with or without a press release will be my problem, and it will be my fault. Any successes will be accredited to you and your company and your government. Once I got that sentence and they were translating into another language, even though both of these guys, one had gone to Stanford, one had gone to Harvard, they spoke better English than me, but they had a Japanese, they had an interpreter, and they said in English, Mr. Pena, that's all we need to hear. Let's have lunch. He says, you have our loyal support until you don't want it anymore. Because they don't want to be associated with the failures. Because a lot of these people that are in positions to be able to help you are politically, if not directly politically appointed. There's some politics that have to do with why they're there. And so all the people I recruit to boards, I tell them, if there's any heat, if there's any air, Dan Pena will take the heat. If there are any successes, it'll be the board, specifically the head of the finance committee, specifically a head of this committee or that committee. And I never get a no. But that takes big cojones on my part, because my self-esteem is so great. I'm surprised we can get it on this little camera shot here.
We do have to go wide on it. All right, final question, final official question here. What's in it for them? We want to make a deal with someone. We have to think about what's their point of view. What are they looking for? And then if we give them that, then they're going to give us what we're looking for. When it comes to mentorship, what's in it for a guy who's so successful that we want him as a mentor? They don't need us for anything.
Correct. There's several things. And these aren't in any order of importance. Okay. Number one, even an old dog wants recognition. And a lot of times, even if you're a rich old dog, you don't get the recognition anymore, and you don't get the adrenaline high. And so this is an opportunity for them to continue that. Next, they don't probably have the energy as much energy as the young kid anymore. Now, that isn't the case with me, but I mean, they don't have the energy or the inclination, but they still want to be part of a successful team. Everybody wants to be a part of a successful team. Look at how San Francisco band together for the 49ers, but they lost, unfortunately. I was a 49. I'm still not normally a 49er fan, but In that Super Bowl, I certainly was. And so they want to be a part of a successful team. Next, we give equity in the transaction to our dream team, to our mentors. We give them. We don't make them pay. We give them. So everybody on the board gets from 2 to 5% of the deal. And I often ask when they say, well, why am I, if they don't want to put in money and they're not asking, why do I give them? Because it locks them in a positive way. It sucks them into the vortex. You have no idea how hard a successful guy will work for 2% of a company that is just a startup. He'll make more phone calls, go to more meetings. You don't have to buy his airline ticket, et cetera, for 2%. And then when that's successful, when he gets to go back to the country club or the tennis club or wherever the hell, the Harvard alumni meeting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we saw your name in the press release as a shareholder and a director of XYZ company. How much did you make there? Just like you're asking me. And I say, well, I can't, when we go public, it'll be a public disclosure. But until then, that's confidential, boys. I can't tell you how much I made. So it gives them an incentive. So that's what's in it for them. In addition to, a lot of guys just want to give back. Now, sometimes, they'll get a guy like you, Andrew, that'll suck more wind out of their lungs than they thought they were going to give. But I'm here because, to the best of my knowledge, nobody bought my book or a tape, and that's fine. But, if I've had a lot of comments, as I've forwarded you some of them from your following, that they like me. I've seen a couple comments on a blog or something where
I see they also sent you a bunch of emails.
Yeah, and a couple people didn't like me. But that's, I'm surprised as many did like me. Now, maybe all the people that didn't write you don't like me. So that'd probably be equal.
No, I think they liked you. And I know a lot of people liked you. You came across very likable. What I've heard is, and let me talk a little bit here about this. Castle here, of course, is where you live. Right here on the bottom, there's a seminar. I have heard you say some pretty aggressive things to people who come to your seminars. People apparently who've gone to the seminars, people who are fans of yours, will boast about the things that you say.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you feel comfortable saying here, though. I beat him like a rented mule. I beat them just like real life beats them.
Foul language, you beat them up.
Correct.
Personal.
Absolutely. I don't know anybody that says they do, other than maybe the Pope, and he resigned after he got my tweet. Other than the Pope, I don't know anybody on the planet that doesn't use foul language as a high-performance person. Billy Graham, maybe a few like that. But even I know Billy says, damn, hell, bastard.
No, you're saying high-performance people use foul language, and if these people who come to your seminar can't handle the foul languages coming their way, they can't handle being around high performance, and they're not going to be high performance.
Okay. A recent study just came out last week. And I want to say Harvard, but it's not Harvard. I got Harvard on the mind. A recent think tank just came out that said the people that use foul language have a much higher probability of being successful. I'm not making this up. You brought it up. Google it. Or as I say, Google fuck it. Google fuck it, and you'll see that recent study. And if you can't find it, I'll get a hold of the person that sent it to me because I haven't even opened up the link. I already know that because I've been around high-performance people. I've been around, Steve Jobs, God rest his soul, and Donald Trump and a bunch of other guys, Richard Branson, all these guys, they all swear.
I can't find anything right now.
And on the scale from 1 to 10, I'm only probably a 5 or 6 foul language person.
How aggressive are you with people who come to the seminar?
Well, I asked them up front, you have to fill out a form. And I asked, how bad do you want to be successful? Or is this you want to be bullshit? Do you have some sacks or don't you? I ask them that.
You're saying right on the form, you're asking them, do they have nuts?
Yeah. I mean, you got some sacks, and I give them, if they want, I give them 2 or 3. I have a priest that's a mentee. He's God is my witness. A priest. And I unloaded him like I unloaded, and I think I overdid it. I unloaded him, and he's coming to the next seminar again in April.
Oh, this person who nearly gave you a heart attack.
No, not that priest. I have another priest mentee. who's
Okay.
old. This priest, yeah, another priest. He's coming, Father George. And he's coming to the seminar in April, and I will beat him like a rented mule. He says, Dan, you have to be an angel or the devil. And I want to believe you're an angel because you have me question my faith in God. That's pretty heavy.
How do you make him question his faith in God?
Because I say you're not focused enough. If you want to focus, and he runs an orphanage in addition to all the other stuff he does. And I said, you can't do everything, Father. You just can't. Some of this stuff has got to go. And I mean, you telling a priest that who's trying to save everybody's soul, I mean, it's like I cut his eyes out. But he has cut about a fourth of the stuff that he did a year ago when he first came to the seminar. But now you got to cut another fourth. Because would you rather be excellent at everything you do or only an average priest?
And he is willing to do this?
Well, he's cut a fourth, and it was hard. It's like pulling teeth out of him because he's got commitments. He's got commitments to do this. And contrary, if you knew how little a priest makes a month, you wouldn't, when he goes to do a funeral in Eastern Europe where he lives, to do a funeral, it costs him 75 euros for petrol to get there and back. And he only makes 130 euros a month. 130.
130 euro a month.
Yeah. What do? You send the collection plate around more, for starters, which I suggested. I told him to send the collection plate at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end.
Collect 3 times.
Correct, instead of once.
Never even keep that thing sitting. Just keep it moving the whole time.
And guess what happened, Andrew? His income went up 250%. It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
It's a no-brainer. I was looking for the filthier stuff that gets said there. So after the session,
oh no, I met
someone who went to one of your sessions.
C word. I use all the words.
The C word. Yes, that's what it was. So I met someone, obviously, after you did the interview, who went to one of your sessions. He talked about the language use, and he loved it. He said, when I heard that Mixergy was going to have Dan Pena on, I had to watch it. And I asked him this, and then I said, so what about all language? He goes, I love it. But people don't want to say this publicly.
The truth of the matter, most of the people listening to this, with the greatest respect, never met a Bill Gates, never met a Steve Jobs, never met a Don Trump, never met one of the presidents. I've met 3. Never met any of these guys. Even Biden, the vice president, he says to Obama a year ago, this is a big fucking deal. And remember how that was in the news? You should be in the White House. Now, an exception to that is George Bush II didn't swear hardly at all. He didn't swear hardly at all. George Bush I, who I met and knew, did swear, or does swear, I guess, even though he's 88. That's just the way it is. I mean, because there's no mistake that what I feel. When I don't like something, Andrew, I tell you. Like I'll say, one of my favorite sayings is, "Are you fucking crazy? What do you got? Shit for brains?"
I love it. I eat this stuff up. I hear it all the time. People who I interview curse before the interview, during the interview, after the interview. Because of that, I can't get featured on iTunes, apparently, and I'm supposed to clean up their language. I refuse. If iTunes can't handle an entrepreneur cursing, then I don't want to be featured on their stinking site. You're absolutely right. I'm seeing, actually, it's 7:30 p.m. here in San Francisco. It looks like they're about to come in here and clean up this office. So I'm going to end it by saying, first of all, Mr. Dan Pena, thank you for doing the session with us. Number 1. Number 2, I noticed for some reason people send you a lot of messages after they hear you on Mixergy. Please, guys, keep those emails short. I've seen some of the emails you send, Dan. It's a mile long. Keep them short. And number 3, and you respond to them, each one individually, every section of their email. I feel bad. And then finally, if you guys want to connect with Dan, go to danpena.com. Easy to spell, great domain name. And I'm going to say one final point. Thank you so much for doing this. There's my video, and thank you all for being a part of it.